Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be like diving deep, into this topic that's both super complex and also like really, really important understanding. All those behavioral challenges that we see in at-risk kids. Our guide for this deep dive is going to be this lesson all about identifying these challenges.
Okay.
And our mission is to equip you guys with a much clearer understanding of, what's going on beneath the surface and hopefully give you some practical takeaways that you guys can use.
For sure.
Did you know that while some at-risk kids might act out aggressively, others might actually withdraw completely?
Right.
It's fascinating how their responses can vary so widely, right?
It really highlights the individuality of each child's experience.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all picture of an at-risk child.
Okay, so before we jump into specific behaviors, can you help us understand what actually defines a child as at risk?
Think of it as a combination of factors that, stack the deck against them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Poverty plays a huge role, limiting access to resources and creating constant stress.
Yeah.
And then you have family instability,
Yeah.
things like parental mental health struggles,
Yeah.
substance abuse, or domestic violence, all of which, create an unpredictable and often unsafe environment for a child.
It's almost like their foundation is shaky from the start.
Yeah.
And then you layer on top of that things like trauma
Right.
or neglect, which can have a lasting impact on their development.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we can't forget about learning difficulties.
Yeah.
When a child struggles to keep up in school, it can affect their self-esteem and their ability to engage with the world around them,
Wow.
which can also contribute to behavioral challenges.
So it's not just one thing. It's this complex interplay of factors that create a perfect storm, sadly.
Right. And it's within this storm that we start to see these patterns of behavior emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about some of those specific behaviors.
Okay.
The lesson starts with aggression and oppositional behavior, painting a picture of physical aggression, verbal outbursts, defiance of rules, and that constant pushback against authority.
Right.
You've probably seen this in action, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And while it can be frustrating to deal with, remember that this aggression is often a symptom of something deeper.
Right.
Think about a child who's constantly exposed to violence at home.
Right.
It becomes their normal.
Yeah.
They might not even realize that there are other ways to express their emotions.
Or imagine the child who experiences inconsistent discipline.
Yeah.
1 minute, they're punished harshly for a small infraction.
Right.
The next minute, it's completely ignored.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That inconsistency creates so much confusion for a child.
Right.
They never know what to expect. Right.
Which can lead to anxiety and a constant need to test boundaries.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out where the lines are.
It's like a moving target for them.
Yeah, exactly.
The lesson specifically highlights the need for positive reinforcement when it comes to these behaviors.
Right.
I'm curious, do you have a go-to technique
Oh, yeah.
for encouraging positive behaviors in these situations?
One that's really effective,
Yeah.
especially for younger children,
Okay.
is using a reward chart.
Okay.
It sounds simple,
Yeah.
but it provides visual reinforcement for good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a child is struggling with hitting when they're angry.
Okay.
You create a chart with specific goals, like
Yeah.
using words instead of hands, or taking a deep breath when I feel mad.
Right.
Each time they meet that goal,
Yeah.
they get a sticker or a check mark.
Uh-huh.
And after a certain number,
Okay.
they earn a small reward,
Right.
something they enjoy.
It's like building a positive feedback loop. Exactly.
You're focusing on what they're doing right,
Yeah.
which can be so powerful, especially when they're used to getting attention for the negative behaviors.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from punishment to positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
And it's not just about external rewards either.
Right.
You're also teaching them intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
The feeling of accomplishment and pride that comes from mastering a new skill.
Now that's a takeaway I can use.
What's great about this technique is you can tailor it to a child's age and interests. For older kids, maybe the reward is screen time or an outing with friends.
Right.
It's about finding what motivates them and using it to reinforce positive behavior changes.
Okay, so we've talked about aggression,
Right.
but the lesson also mentions hyperactivity and impulsivity.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kids who can't seem to sit still,
Yeah.
blurt out answers,
Right.
and act without thinking.
For sure.
I'm sure we've all encountered a child like this at some point.
Yeah. We definitely have. And the first thing that might pop into your mind is ADHD.
Yeah.
Which is certainly a factor.
Right.
However, you have to remember that stress and trauma can actually mimic those same symptoms.
Interesting.
A child living in a chaotic and unpredictable home might be constantly on edge.
Yeah.
Their nervous system on high alert.
Wow.
It's as if they're wired for fight or flight.
Right.
So they have difficulty focusing and controlling their impulses.
So how do we differentiate between ADHD and behavior driven by a stressful environment? That seems like a tricky distinction to make.
It absolutely is. And that's where a professional evaluation is so important.
Okay.
You'll want to involve a pediatrician or a child psychologist who can assess the child's overall development, medical history, and any contributing factors like trauma or learning disabilities.
It's like putting together a puzzle, gathering all the pieces to get a clearer picture.
Exactly.
Now, the lesson emphasizes the importance of structure and routine in these cases.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense. What I'm curious about is how much structure is too much. Could an overly rigid schedule actually backfire with a child who thrives on spontaneity?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to the need for individualized approaches.
Okay.
While some children with hyperactivity and impulsivity thrive on predictable routines for others, too much rigidity can feel stifling and actually increase anxiety.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot, a balance between structure and flexibility.
So what might that look like in practice? Can you give us an example?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a child who struggles to get ready for school in the mornings. Instead of just telling them to get ready, you could create a visual schedule with pictures of each step.
Okay.
Brushing teeth, getting dressed, eating breakfast, packing their backpack.
Okay.
This visual aid provides clear expectations and helps them stay on track.
It takes the guesswork out of it and helps them feel more in control of the process.
Exactly.
I love it.
And within that structure, you can build in some flexibility.
Okay.
Maybe they get to choose the order of their morning routine or select their outfit from a few pre-approved options.
Got it.
It's about empowering them within a framework of predictability.
So it's not about being a drill sergeant.
Right.
It's about creating a supportive environment where the child feels safe and prepared to navigate their day.
Exactly. Now, in contrast to the outward-focused behaviors we've just talked about, the lesson also mentions social withdrawal and isolation.
Okay.
This is the child who seems shy, anxious, and actively avoids interaction.
Right.
They might fade into the background, preferring to be alone. Have you seen that pattern before?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's just as concerning as the more outward behaviors,
Right.
even though it might not be as disruptive in a classroom setting, for example.
Yeah.
We tend to notice the kids who are acting out.
But those who are silently struggling can easily slip through the cracks.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's like the iceberg analogy, you know?
Right.
What we see on the surface is just a small part of what's going on beneath. So what are some of the factors that might contribute to this withdrawal and isolation in at-risk children?
Well, often it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
Neglect can play a significant role.
Okay.
If a child's basic emotional needs aren't met, they might learn to shut down emotionally as a way to cope.
Right.
They might withdraw because they've learned that reaching out doesn't bring the comfort and connection they crave.
So it's a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from further hurt.
Precisely.
Wow.
And then you have things like anxiety and depression,
Yeah.
which can also manifest as social withdrawal.
Right.
The child might feel overwhelmed by social situations, fearing judgment or rejection.
They might lack the confidence to put themselves out there, especially if they've had negative experiences in the past, like bullying.
Exactly.
Right.
Bullying can be incredibly damaging to a child's self-esteem
Yeah.
and can make them hesitant to engage with others.
Right.
They might start to believe that they're not worthy of friendship or connection.
It breaks my heart to think of a child feeling that way.
Yeah.
The lesson suggests creating safe spaces for these kids, offering opportunities for interaction in a low-pressure environment.
Right.
What might that look like in a real-world setting?
It's all about finding ways to connect with the child's interests and strengths.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a child who loves to draw, but is too anxious to participate in a large art class.
Right.
You could create a smaller, more intimate setting.
Okay.
Maybe just one or two other children with a shared interest.
It's about meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
Creating an environment where they feel comfortable enough to take those first steps towards connection.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be anything formal or structured.
Right.
It could be as simple as inviting the child to play a board game, read a book together, or work on a puzzle.
Right.
The key is to create an opportunity for positive social interaction without the pressure of performance or judgment.
And maybe through those shared experiences, they can start to build trust and confidence.
Right.
Those essential building blocks of healthy relationships.
You got it.
Okay.
Now, moving on, the lesson dives into another challenging behavior.
Okay.
Emotional dysregulation.
Mm-hmm.
You might remember, we touched on this earlier when we were talking about hyperactivity.
Right.
It's that difficulty managing emotions.
Yeah.
Which can look like extreme reactions, frequent meltdowns, or rapid shifts in mood. It's like their emotions are on a roller coaster with sudden highs and lows.
And as you mentioned before, it's not just a matter of bad behavior. There are often like deeper underlying causes at play. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Think of it this way. The part of the brain responsible for emotional control, the prefrontal cortex, is still developing in children.
Yeah.
When you add in the impact of trauma or chronic stress, it's like throwing a wrench into that delicate developmental process.
So it's not that they're choosing to be dysregulated.
Right.
Their brains are literally struggling to manage those intense emotions.
Exactly.
Wow.
Imagine a child who's experienced neglect.
Yeah.
They might become hypersensitive to any perceived threat or rejection.
Okay.
Because their early experiences taught them that the world is an unpredictable and unsafe place.
So even a small trigger.
Right.
Like a friend not wanting to play.
Exactly.
Could send them spiraling into a meltdown.
Right.
Yeah.
Their emotional responses are out of proportion to the situation because their brains are still processing those past experiences.
The lesson talks about the importance of emotional modeling in these cases. What exactly does that look like?
It's about being mindful of our own emotional responses, especially in those challenging moments when a child is dysregulated.
Right.
We've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're exhausted, you've had a long day, and suddenly your child is having a complete meltdown over a spilled glass of milk.
Oh, I've been there, believe me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the chaos and react in a way that escalates the situation.
Exactly.
But in those moments, it's so important to take a deep breath and try to regulate our own emotions first.
Right.
Instead of yelling or getting angry, we can model calmness and understanding.
Right.
We can say something like,
okay,
I can see that you're really upset about the spilled milk. It's okay to feel frustrated.
Yeah.
But we don't throw things when we're angry.
It's about meeting their emotional intensity with empathy and compassion.
You got it.
Not with more intensity.
And it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about showing them that it's okay to have big feelings.
Yeah.
And that there are healthy ways to express and manage those feelings.
It's like we're their emotional coach.
Exactly.
Teaching them the skills they need to navigate those ups and downs. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of skills,
the
lesson also mentions teaching emotion identification.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means?
Think of it this way.
Yeah.
Just like we teach children the names of colors, shapes, and numbers, we can teach them the names of emotions.
Okay.
We can help them build a vocabulary for their feelings.
Got it.
So instead of just saying, I'm upset, they can learn to identify and express specific emotions like sadness, anger, frustration, or disappointment.
And that understanding could be so empowering, right?
Absolutely.
If they can name it, they can start to tame it.
Right.
But how do we actually teach these emotional literacy skills?
Yeah.
It seems pretty abstract for a young child.
It's all about making it concrete and relatable.
Okay.
You can use books, games,
Yeah.
or even facial expression cards to help children learn to identify different emotions.
Right.
You can also talk about your own feelings, modeling that emotional vocabulary.
For example, you might say,
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little anxious about this presentation I have to give.
Exactly.
My stomach feels a little funny and I keep tapping my foot.
Exactly. You're not just telling them about anxiety, you're showing them what it looks and feels like.
It's like giving them a roadmap for understanding their own emotional landscape.
Yeah.
Now, the lesson also talks about teaching calming techniques.
Right.
What are some strategies you found helpful for children who are struggling with emotional regulation?
There are so many great techniques out there.
Yeah.
And the key is to find what resonates with each individual child.
Right.
Some kids respond well to deep breathing exercises,
Okay.
while others might benefit from sensory tools like weighted blankets or fidget toys.
Those sensory tools can be so helpful
Yeah,
for grounding them in the present moment when their emotions are spiraling.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the power of physical activity. Going for a run, jumping on a trampoline,
Okay.
or even just taking a brisk walk can help release pent-up energy and regulate those big feelings.
It's like hitting the reset button on their nervous system.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious, what about those situations where a child is having a full-blown meltdown?
Yeah.
What are some in-the-moment strategies that parents or caregivers can use?
First and foremost,
Okay.
stay calm.
Right.
Remember that emotional dysregulation is often a response to feeling overwhelmed and out of control.
Yeah.
If you mirror that energy with your own heightened emotions,
Yeah.
it will only escalate the situation.
It's like pouring gasoline on fire.
Exactly.
You're just feeding the chaos.
Instead, try to create a sense of safety and containment.
Okay.
If the child is safe, you might try holding them gently or wrapping them in a blanket.
Right.
This can provide a sense of physical and emotional security.
It's like creating a cocoon of calm amidst the storm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once the child is starting to calm down,
Okay.
you can begin to validate their feelings and help them process what happened.
Okay.
Avoid lecturing or trying to reason with them in the heat of the moment.
Right.
That can come later.
It's about meeting them where they are emotionally and helping them ride out the wave.
Exactly.
And sometimes that might mean just sitting with them in silence, letting them know that you're there for them without judgment.
That's so powerful.
Right.
That silent presence can speak volumes.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
remember that these techniques are just a starting point.
Okay.
If a child is struggling with significant emotional dysregulation,
Yeah.
it's essential to seek professional guidance
Right.
from a therapist or counselor who can provide more specialized support.
It's about knowing when to call in the experts.
Exactly.
And speaking of expertise, the next behavior on our list is one that often leaves parents and caregivers feeling utterly baffled.
Okay.
Difficulty following rules and instructions.
Yeah,
Something we can all relate to, right?
definitely.
We've all experienced that frustration of repeating ourselves over and over again,
Right.
only to be met with blank stares or outright defiance.
It can definitely be a head scratcher.
Right.
And as with all these behaviors we've been unpacking,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that there's usually a reason behind it.
Right.
It's not just kids being deliberately difficult.
The lesson points to inconsistent discipline as a major factor. It makes sense.
Yeah.
If the rules keep changing or consequences are unpredictable,
Right.
it's hard to know what's actually expected.
Imagine trying to learn a game where the rules are constantly shifting.
Right.
You'd be confused and probably a little hesitant to play, right?
Yeah.
It's the same for kids. If they experience inconsistent discipline,
Yeah.
they may constantly test the boundaries
Right.
because they're not sure where those boundaries lie.
It's like trying to navigate a maze where the walls keep moving.
Exactly.
And it's not just about household rules.
Right.
This can show up in school
Yeah,
during social interactions, even with simple tasks like getting ready for bed.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That lack of consistency creates a ripple effect throughout their lives.
Right.
And beyond inconsistent discipline,
Yeah.
we also have to consider the possibility of learning difficulties or cognitive challenges.
Okay.
Some kids might struggle to follow instructions simply because they have difficulty processing information or
Yeah.
understanding what's being asked of them.
So it's not defiance.
Right.
It's a different way of thinking and learning.
Exactly.
Love it.
And that's where having open communication with teachers and perhaps getting a professional evaluation can be incredibly helpful. It's about identifying those underlying challenges and providing appropriate support.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that one size does not fit all when it comes to learning and development.
The lesson also highlights how trauma or chronic stress can make it even harder to concentrate and follow instructions.
Right. This goes back to the impact of trauma on the developing brain.
Okay.
If a child is constantly in that fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
their brain is prioritizing survival over learning and complex thinking. It's
Right.
like their internal alarm system is constantly going off, making it difficult to focus and process information.
So even if they want to follow the rules,
Yeah,
their brain might simply not have the bandwidth for it in that moment.
that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
So what can we do to support these kids who are struggling?
Yeah.
Well, first and foremost, we need to create a structured and supportive environment.
Right.
That means clear, consistent expectations
Yeah.
communicated in a way that the child can understand.
So breaking down complex instructions into smaller, more manageable steps.
Yeah.
Using visual aids like pictures or checklists and being patient. Very, very patient.
Patience is key. Absolutely.
Right.
And it's not just about what we say. It's also about how we say it.
Right.
Our tone of voice, body language, and facial expressions all convey messages to children.
So even if we're using the right words, if our tone is harsh or impatient,
Yeah.
that can send a mixed message and actually escalate the situation.
Exactly.
Oh.
It's about approaching the child with empathy and understanding.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine feeling constantly overwhelmed and confused. That's what it's like for many of these kids.
Right.
They're not trying to be difficult.
Right.
They're just trying to navigate a world that can feel very overwhelming.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It's about meeting them where they are, not where we expect them to be.
Right.
And I know the lesson emphasizes the importance of positive reinforcement,
Yeah.
catching them doing something right
Yeah.
and acknowledging their efforts.
Positive reinforcement is so powerful.
Yeah.
Especially for kids who are used to hearing what they're doing wrong. Instead of focusing on the negative, try to catch them being good and acknowledge those efforts.
Okay.
I noticed you put away your toys without being asked. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
Or, I appreciate that you used your words when you were feeling frustrated.
Right.
Simple statements like that can go a long way.
It's about building their confidence and helping them see themselves as capable and responsible.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not about giving them empty praise.
Right.
It's about being specific and genuine in your feedback. Let them know exactly what they did well and why it matters.
So we've talked about positive reinforcement, but what about consequences?
Yeah.
Are there any specific strategies you recommend when a child breaks a rule, especially when it seems like they're doing it intentionally?
Consequences are important, but they need to be framed as a learning opportunity, not as punishment. The goal is to teach, not to shame.
Right.
And those consequences need to be consistent,
Yeah.
fair, and developmentally appropriate.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's say a child keeps hitting their sibling, even though they know it's wrong.
Right.
Instead of yelling or resorting to harsh punishments,
Yeah.
try a calm and firm approach.
Okay.
You might say something like, I see that you're feeling angry right now,
Okay.
but hitting is not okay. It hurts,
Right.
and we need to find a different way to express your anger.
Okay.
Then you can offer a choice. You can either take a few minutes to calm down in your room, or we can practice some deep breathing together.
It's about giving them the power to choose within a set of clear boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also about teaching them coping skills.
Right.
Instead of just punishing the behavior, you're giving them tools to manage those big feelings in a more constructive way.
That's a brilliant approach.
Yeah.
It shifts the focus from punishment to problem solving and skill building.
Exactly.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
And it's clear that these behavioral challenges are complex and often intertwined with deeper issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that every behavior has a meaning.
Right.
Our job is to try to understand that meaning, to see the child behind the behavior.
And to respond with empathy,
Yes.
patience, and a commitment to supporting their growth and development.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that even small acts of kindness and understanding can make a big difference in the lives of at-risk children.
Yeah.
It's about creating a world where every child, regardless of their circumstances, feels seen, heard, and supported.
That's such a powerful message.
Yeah.
And I think it ties into everything we've been talking about today. The importance of shifting our perspective from judgment to curiosity, from punishment to understanding, from focusing on what's wrong to focusing on what's possible.
So well said.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I encourage everyone listening to reflect on their own interactions with children. How can you bring more empathy, patience, and understanding into those relationships?
Right.
Even small changes can make a world of difference.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical tools that you can use to support the children in your lives.
I hope so.
Until next time,
Yes.
keep learning, keep growing,
Keep growing.
and keep believing in the power of human connection.
Absolutely.